Day 103, the DynCorp harvest. If you've been watching the series, you've noticed that the pattern is for farming a country with DynCorp, you first start by disruption, then you do your violent overthrow or impeachment. So this is happening now in Berkeley with Soros's groups down there, and Soros has openly called for the overthrow of Trump, and then they'll probably move some kind of thing in the Senate to impeach Trump or the House. So if you haven't watched the series, these are the steps. Basically, you need to topple the country first to get control, so then you can farm it. And DynCorp is the farmer. Instead of farming, crops, they farm people. That involves viruses and vaccines, introducing viruses and vaccines that weaken the immune systems of the folks, so that the organ transplants will be easier. Believe it or not, it's going to be sex and drug trafficking and all kinds of organ and blood harvesting. So there's our man, Pug Winokur. He's the same guy who gave us Enron. So you're going to find out that these people at Harvard University that donate to this endowment, where it looks kind of like a heart, I know that's not a heart in the Veritas motto of Harvard, but you're going to find these donors through Larry Summers, and the Harvard University presidents are going to be the ones trading life plans and replacement organs for endowments. I wanted to talk a little bit about UAE. There's a doctor in Israel that just had his practice shut down for selling bone marrow. Didn't work out very well, and he's moved to Germany, I think. But the UAE doctors, this is kind of like what Trump's talking about, is shifting all these jobs outside of the United States. The Cleveland Clinic is, it's just like one of the greatest, medical institutions of all time. But they've moved to the UAE, to Abu Dhabi. And I'll show you some new developments that have happened in the UAE. This is the country right here. Basically, it was created by the U.S. to chop an area off here for the Strait of Hormuz. This is a key strategic spot. If you control this, you control the Persian Gulf. And the UAE was lopped off of Saudi Arabia so that we would militarily control that, sort of like the Suez Canal. But what's happened over here on the medical front is that the UAE has changed their organ laws so that you can call somebody dead before they're dead and take their organs. So it's basically live transfer. And then, of course, they just had their first recent kidney transplant in Dubai. So here's Abu Dhabi, where Cleveland Clinic is, and here's where they just did the new transport. So I wouldn't have a problem with this. This sounds like good trade and good international trade and so forth, and us teaching, the Cleveland Clinic and so forth. But you have this problem. When you have organs disappearing like they did in Kosovo, I still believe, by the way, that Kosovo is providing, or there's rooms with walls completely covered in pictures this size of people that are still missing, continue to be missing, all men. But we have these organs easily within a short flight to UAE and Bahrain. So if Steve Jobs got a heart at Vanderbilt, he was way ahead of the curve for getting a new liver. Excuse me. There is a market, and it looks like the new strategy is to fly the person to UAE to do the transplant. Now, I'm for doing these transplants in the United States at Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland. I'm from Cleveland, so my dad went to Case Western, so I want to see the business stay in Cleveland. And the more you let DynCorp, it's kind of like the CIA. The CIA likes to do things to go around the Congress. They're supposed to do what's called a finding before they do a covert operation, right? It's a finding that allows the Gang of Eight, the Senate Intelligence Committee, to say, hey, this is a bad idea, or hey, this is a good idea. It's kind of like a check and balance, on the executive. They go around that by doing operations through the French. And yesterday I showed the French doctor from Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, who was behind all of this activity in Kosovo, and I think he still is. Kusher, I can't remember his name exactly, so I won't say it. Then I'm going to shine some light on this program called Doc to Doc. It's a program where U.S. hospitals say, oh, we're not going to be using this stuff. It's going to go into the landfill. Let's fly it down And this company called NetJets says, let's fly it down to Haiti, and then we'll take it to some hospitals, which is great. That's all well and good, but it just smacks of this cover. First of all, they fly down a passenger jet that seats 20. It's not a cargo jet. Plus, this is an executive jet that is extremely expensive. This has DynCorp written all over it. They fly the down to the hospital here in Maribalais. They unload a few boxes, but what's going back is 20 prisoners, I believe, 20 prisoners in the jet. That's what you don't see in the social justice film that they make. And I believe that's going back to Chicago and Holman Center. I believe there's in Holman Square is a holding pen. A lot of people also talk about this La Différence school. One of the ways to make sure that you get a match genetically is to father a child. Your child's going to have a close genetic match to you. A lot of people remember that Washington went down on his spring break, George Washington, and went to Barbados, and he had a child with a slave woman there. And this is kind of conspiracy theory, but it's true. And anyway, Alexander Hamilton was that son. And he was kind of he came back to Washington when he kind of grew up a little bit. And this kind of strategy, if you want to kind of prime the pump, so to speak, and make sure that you have genetic matches in your later years, if you're a CIA agent, you can have a couple of kids and they can be raised over here at La Différence School. This La Différence School is a very good school up here in the north. Completely different than down here in the south. So again, I forgot to say that there was a La Différence School. It looks like it's for CIA kids. Again, there's this Russian thing, great documentary about Soros and the Médecins Sans Frontières being the NGO that did the organ extractions. So, and those are being taught in the field by Partners in Health, as well as the Médecins Sans Frontières doctors. So I just wanted to shine a light on Doc to Doc. I also wanted to say that I'm more and more convinced every day that World Vision is one of the people that is planning the viruses. DynCorp is spraying, especially in Colombia and El Salvador and so forth. They're spraying the populations. There's lawsuits over this, Ecuador. But I believe they're spraying the virus, and then World Vision's providing the vaccine. So, and Kathy O'Brien testified to all this in Haiti. She said, I was a sex slave in Haiti, and I witnessed the drug running and virus testing. So I won't belabor that. I'm going to be meeting with the Oliver Stone folks in a minute. We're going to do an interview, a filmed interview, so everybody will see my face. So, I've gotten, some folks don't trust if they just hear the voice, so I'll do that. And again, these are State Department officials using U.S. aid to just go to these countries. And this guy, Jorge Puello, is what's known as a fixer. It's kind of like when a reporter goes down to a country and he doesn't speak the language. The fixer sets up the translator and where he's going to stay and all that stuff. He's the fixer for 4 different countries, and he's going to have somebody in country in every one of those countries. So it's kind of a hierarchical thing. You're going to be setting up all the rat lines. You're going to be setting up the drug rat line, the sex rat line, the child trafficking rat line, the organ harvesting rat line, the gun rat line. It's all one thing. And I thought it was different, but it isn't. It's all one thing. And you're going to find the same thing in India. You're going to find the same thing in India. It started in India first in 1974. So this Carlos Slim we're going to expose Carlos Slim before it's all over. Again, this is old news. These brownstones, or you want to call them underground railroads or just railroad operations. Basically, you're just trying to take down your political opponents. And this goes back to 1974. Robert Merritt wrote a book about, luring these Watergate burglars into gay situations so they would have something on the Watergate burglars. Before Watergate, before the Richard Nixon side of the story, Watergate was the biggest brownstone ever. And they changed it. There's another one. Vinson ran another one over at Barney Frank's house. That was a D.C. Madam case, but there's just over and over and over. That's what Thingat Thomas is doing. His brownstone that he bought from James Alefantis. So they're not even bothering to change, to go through a cutout organization. These guys are just passing down the same long tradition of the CIA of setting up these people. The only problem now is because we have this huge growth in contractors, We've gone from 2,000 contractors to 7,000. Now we're giving this capability to Underground Railroad, to contractors, and they are not motivated by the fact that you're guilty. They're motivated by the fact that, hey, what business competitor do you want to take out? They're motivated by the Fortune 500, and Goldman Sachs and Wall Street. Who do you want to take out? And so that's what this has been happening in the last 20 years, but it's really gotten out of hand in the last 5 years, as you can see. This number was only 2,000 5 years ago. So everyone wants me to talk about McCobey, so I will. McCobey's he's a lawyer. He defended Elephantis, and he defended David Brock, the guy who runs Media Matters, $850,000 blackmail case. Well, what do you think that was? That was a brownstone operation. So he's the lawyer. They also used to call it the setup man. When you would go, you're a case officer in the CIA, and like Q, if you remember James Bond, Q, he always meets with him. You meet with a guy and he says, okay, here's the papers, here's the articles of incorporation for Petit Frere Seur, here's the diplomatic passport you're going to need. It's the paperwork guy, the setup guy, the kind of the last guy you talk to before you leave the office. So that's what McCobey does. He's a CIA guy. Elephantis is a CIA guy. Dad was CIA. He lives up in Northwest Washington. He goofed off. He didn't study. He could have been a Yalie, but he wasn't a Yalie. He wants to be a Yalie, but he didn't. He didn't study. He's not a Braverman. So like I said, this whole web of using these women and so forth is being pushed out to private contractors, so like DynCorp, so they can pick whoever they want. So they take an enemies list of Hillary or an enemies list of George Bush, and then they go through it, and then they say, well, we're gonna get the guy to forfeit all his assets. We're gonna get him to get divorced. We're gonna have him sell his house. We're gonna break up his jobs when he's finally living in a trailer. So that's JTTF. Now they did a little show and said, oh, JTTF's going to leave San Francisco because they're going to target Muslims. That's not who they're targeting. The list is about 3 million people, and they're not targeting Muslims. So anyway, there's Pug Winokur. That's his. So like I said, this brownstone stuff goes back 40 years. This Carl Schaffler, he was the first Tim Ballard. He was the D.C. cop that made the Watergate arrest. But he was the guy who did all the setups. He had all the informants and did all the setups for all the brownstones. This goes back 40 years. This is just this repeating pattern. Like I said, now it's been privatized now through Booz Allen and companies like Operation Underground Railroad. So I'm still saying it's the hospital ships. People have been sending me the different hospital ships and the locations. For the folks involved in these kind of schemes, it's not in your best interest to wait to testify. Get your testimony to an FBI agent in a screened interview. Get those thumb drives to the different members of Congress and about 10 different journalists. Somebody will print it. So, and I'm not going to say too much other than this. They're talking about a couple of more emails, Wikipedia, a couple more of these emails coming out in a couple of batches. That's a rumor I've heard. I can't support that rumor, but I've just heard that recently, and I can't really say much more about that. The Eric Braverman's case files. This is Dr. Eric Braverman's case files. Are going to have all of the customers. Okay, there's been a lot of people that have touched that. In terms of depositions and so forth, and you go through a messy divorce for 4 years or 5 years like he's done. So I think there's also a potential leak there. I'm not making a prediction, I'm just saying that there may be a leak there. And keep looking at this on-site OHS, keep sending me these contracts, because I'm almost seeing wherever on-site OHS is, I'm seeing a spike of kidnappings. So keep feeding me that. First thing, you have to have a working theory, and you have to use statistics. They say the future of journalism is data analysis. If you can correlate, for instance, disappearances and kidnappings within a 3-mile radius, this is how they actually solve cholera, right? Or water disease, typhoid. This is how they solve typhoid. Epidemiology. You only have statistics. You just map the incidence, And then they figured out, oh, it's this one pump that was killing all the people in England. Same thing with on-site OHS. Need to do a 5-mile ring around these OHS locations and see how the kidnappings are affected. Last slide, because I'm going to shoot an interview here pretty quick, but everyone said Trump's been gave Chaffetz the go-ahead. I don't think so. I think if Trump does need to realize something, though, they are going to try to impeach him or militarily overthrow him. They don't want this to come out. So he has to publish these emails, just no matter what it says about him, if he wants to stay president. I think if something came out about him 20 years ago with an email, it's not going to say the girl's age. Maybe she was 16, maybe she was 18. Who knows? I don't know. But it's not worth losing your whole presidency over. Here we are in just the second week, and we're almost into the Soros people talking about a coup, and burning cars and beating up students in Berkeley. So I always like to leave on Preet looking at his picture on the wall here. This gentleman here, the good thing about what Netanyahu's doing is he's saying enough is enough. You're completely surrounding my country with all these terrorists, these 32 different countries with Muslim Brotherhood terrorists. I'm not going to let it go on. I have the 650,000 emails. Even if I do hang my foreign minister out to dry, for your brownstone operation, I'm going to do it because I don't want stingers right outside Tel Aviv. Okay, so that's it for this morning, and I'll talk to everybody later this afternoon.